Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting and informative session of the Analyst brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi. In today's session, we will discuss 7 important articles as featured in the Hindu and Indian Express for your comprehensive understanding of the current affairs explained to you in the easiest language possible. The topics are as follows. From your analysis section, which also provides you the much important avenue to actually practice daily answer writing, in the first topic, we are going to understand the emerging concept of right to repair and the various debates surrounding it. Then, in the second topic, we'll try to understand the plight of Anganwadi workers in the backdrop of the first artificial intelligence empowered Anganwadi which has come in the state of Maharashtra. Then, from your simplified section, we'll take up 5 news. We will not only try to simplify the news for you, but also provide you the much important value addition keeping in mind the approaching Mains 2025. So, stay tuned. The today's editorial highlights that how government has accepted a report which has proposed a repairability index for mobile phones and appliances. The index which will rank these mobile phones and appliances on the ease of repair and the spare part access, thus bringing the concept of right to repair in the limelight, which forms an important component of your GS3 paper under the larger theme of environment conservation and GS2 paper under the theme of government policies and interventions. So the first question which shall be emerging in your mind is that what is this concept of right to repair? Right to repair basically refers to a kind of a policy framework which is basically directed by the government legislation, allowing the consumers to actually repair and modify their own devices. So let's say, for example, under the extreme societal pressure, I ended up buying an iPhone, even though I cannot afford it, but just for the sake of my dignity, have an imagination. And this brand new iPhone is now facing some kind of hardware problem. Let's say, for example, the screen is not responding. So in this particular situation, I have two recourses. Either I can go to the service center of the brand itself, where the person is telling me the hefty cost of the changing of the screen or telling me 5 kind of the various technical issues. Because I do not possess that kind of technical knowledge, I am unable to understand that altogether. The second is that I actually go to a third party service provider, which can be, let's say, for example, a vendor or a small shops, the shops which you guys actually can see around in the Karol Bagh market. This particular person is telling me that they do not have access to the original product provided by these brands, but they have some cheaper alternatives. Obviously, the functionality of my mobile or the effective functioning is actually going to decline for sure. The right to repair actually act as an alternative to both of these recourses, which actually implies that as the customer of the product, I should have right and access to the knowledge, the technical knowledge to actually repair this mobile, as well as the spare products. Let's say, for example, screen in this case shall be easily accessible in the market at a cheaper cost. This is basically the idea of right to repair, to repair with ease at home as well as at a reasonable cost. But don't you think that this idea of right to repair actually acts as a kind of an antithesis to the idea of profit maximization? So for a moment, imagine yourself as a owner of the Apple brand. अच्छा लग रहा है. The point is that as a company, when you are actually targeting for profit maximization, you will actually want your customers to keep on using your services as regular interval to actually provide a kind of a regular flow of income for you, revenue for you. So in that particular case, it's obvious that you would try to hold proprietary rights over these spare products as well as the technical knowledge of repairing. And you would not want these two to be easily accessible to the customers or to these third-party service providers. Thus, this idea of profit maximization actually acts as a kind of an antithesis and infringes the idea of right to repair. The idea which actually derived from the Motor Vehicle Owners' Right to Repair Act 2012 in USA, which actually directed the manufacturers of the automobiles that they shall provide the complete documentation about all the parts which are involved in manufacturing of the automobile. They should also provide the technical knowledge, how to construct and reconstruct any part if it is required, and all of the kind of various spare products shall be easily accessible to an independent owner of the vehicle as well as such small shops which we were discussing. So from there the right to repair actually originated. The next question which you shall ask is, what is the need of right to repair in today's time? The first and foremost is the various kind of business strategies, the crony capitalism which is actually being applied to prevent third party repairing altogether. One example can be, let's say for example, parts sparing. So let's say for example there are companies like Apple, of which you guys are owner of now. The point is what they are doing, they are basically creating several components. The components, let's say for example, which can be included in the mobile with such a serial number that it actually requires a kind of a specific pairing with a specific kind of devices. So even though there are cheaper and compatible alternatives of other brands are available in the market, but they cannot be integrated into these companies' ecosystem. So as a customer or as a consumer, you do not have any choice but rather to buy these expensive products. Second is various kind of software locks. So let's say for example there are various cars. Now they are being designed with such kind of software that you cannot pair or update it with any kind of third party software altogether. Then these companies are actually providing various kind of trade-in programs, or for example exchange programs which you guys might have heard about. So that basically kind of propagates impulsive purchasing by the buyer. So let's say for example your device has become 1 year old. Suddenly you will start seeing such exchange offers floating on various platforms that if you want to exchange your old device, get a new device. This new device has one extra feature, but for that also you need to pay extra money to the company. Then they are also indulging into a predatory pricing mechanism. So let's say for example, I went to my maternal house. There is a very playful nephew of mine who actually wanted my mobile to actually play a new game. The kind of the society in which we live in, specifically in our country, it is very hard to say no, specifically to your family members. So I ended up giving my mobile to this person, and this person actually ended up breaking my mobile, the screen of my mobile. Such a great nephew. So now when I'm actually going to the company and I'm saying that can you change the screen of my particular mobile which has now got broken, the company is telling me that the mobile which is actually costing 15,000 rupees, the price of the screen itself is 10,000 rupees. So now that is basically kind of nudging the consumer behavior, where I will start thinking on the lines that why to, let's say, repair an old mobile if I can just invest 5,000 more and actually get a new one. So this is kind of a predatory pricing mechanism which is taking place. And this is exactly what was found in a kind of a survey which was conducted by a local platform called as Local Circle, which actually found that 46% of the households ended up buying new devices despite having less than 5-year-old devices at home. And the reason which they cited, hassles of coordinating service with a brand, the process which was time consuming and cumbersome, the prohibitive cost of repairing, as well as if there is some kind of new updates which they have done from these third party service providers, that is actually leading to what? Repeated failures after customization. So they are basically looking for a new device at a very short intervals of time. And this is exactly what has been highlighted in today's editorial as well, where it cites 2023 iFixit global report, according to which only 23% of the smartphones which are being sold in Asia are easily repairable. Why? Because of the various design constraints, the technical terms of which now you guys know about. The second major issue is the profit maximization strategy. Let's say for example, you guys are the owner of the Apple. Obviously, if you ended up creating an everlasting and artificial intelligence enabled updation system, so the person can keep on updating the mobile with every new technology which is emerging, don't you think that your sale across the years will actually start going down? You will start losing the customers because they have a kind of an everlasting phone altogether. So to actually maximize your profit and ensure a constant source of revenue, these companies are planning something called as planned obsolescence, where the companies update their product unnecessarily to actually convince the buyers to keep on upgrading their devices. Also, there is another version of it, mostly found in the Indian customers as well, where there is something called as perceived obsolescence. The consumer feel the need to constantly buy new versions of the product to just be on the trend. For example, can anybody of you highlight any such major difference between iPhone 15 and iPhone 16 which has featured here? And the same can also be seen from the table here below, where let's say for example, just look at the desired lifetime for a smartphone, which is around 5 to 6 years. The design lifetime by these companies are actually 3 times lower than that. And the actual time for these particular devices are lasting, let's say for example on average basis across the country, is actually much lesser than that as well. So this is the concept of planned obsolescence, and this planned obsolescence creates what? A kind of an artificial scarcity of the product, and thus translates into a kind of an artificial demand. The third is the potential to generate various kind of electronic waste because of the discarding of the older products which are taking place, and that is a very serious concern for our country. For example, if we look at the headline itself, the electronic waste is on the rise. India is now one of the top 5 e-waste producers in the world, ranking around 4th after China, USA. According to the joint study which was conducted by ASSOCHAM, it actually contributes to most or to the around 2 million tons of electronic waste which is being generated in our country. The state of Maharashtra itself generates around 20% of the country's e-waste. But what is the recycling percentage of all of these waste which we are generating? So out of this total electronic waste of 2 million tons per annum, only 22% of it is actually being recycled. Rest all of it is actually being dumped outside in the environment, and thus they are actually posing serious concern. In this particular case, you guys can also recall the issue of microplastics which we were discussing in the previous lecture. For example, the kind of the disintegration of this electronic waste which takes place because of, let's say for example, exposure to the UV rays, it actually generates a lot of microplastic with less than 5 mm, leading to various kind of microbeads. And these microbeads passes through the food chain, bioaccumulates, and then leads to biomagnification, specifically through 2 routes. One is the soil and other is the water, thus contaminating both of them. So for example, such soil contamination can very significantly hamper the food productivity of our country. Such water contamination or clogging of these aquatic life, these blue water bodies, specifically in the urban areas, are actually leading to, first of all, kind of the loss of such blue water bodies, loss of aquatic life in that, and thus kind of impacting on significant level the overall biodiversity altogether. At the same time, they have significant impact on human health, these microplastics which are being generated or being bifurcated from this electronic waste. For example, you guys can recall about their carcinogenic activity, thus causing cancer, or for example, declining fertility, or for example, the various kind of cardiovascular diseases which they cause. So that is also a very serious concern, the electronic waste. The next is that in this particular case, there are also certain positives which can happen or be derived from this concept of right to repair. The first is that there are already several countries, the developed and developing countries, who has taken these steps in the regard of adopting the idea of right to repair. For example, in the United States of America, an executive order was launched by the presidency of Biden, where they actually limited the manufacturer's ability to restrict repair by small and independent players. In Canada, the right to repair has been provided for electronic devices and home appliances. In France, there has been introduction of repairability index, where it has actually now been providing the ability to repair products at the center to guide the consumer decisions altogether. So now let's say for example, any product which you are buying, there will be a repairability index, and it will tell you that how much repairable this product is by you at home. So you will be able to make like more informed consumer choices. The next is in South Africa, where there has been enforcement of Competition Act to actually provide information to customers, specifically in the automobile sector. Also, the article today highlights that how such idea of right to repair, if such information, spare parts, technical know-how is actually being disseminated to various local shops, it will end up creating various non-farm jobs. And this was exactly the idea of Economic Survey of 2025 itself, where it basically envisaged that to actually sustain the increasing number of workforce which is entering into our economy, we need to create 78.5 lakh non-farm jobs by the year of 2030. Further, this concept will actually end up boosting the recycling and the concept of circular economy, where, let's say, for example, the producers of such electronic waste, they have been actually guided under extended producer responsibility to collect this waste, recycle it, reuse the same product, and thus reduce, let's say, for example, the various kinds of materials and minerals which we are using to actually create these products under the e-waste management rules 2022. Now try to expand the horizon of your thinking. Don't you think that, let's say, for example, if we are keep on reusing the same mobile and it is designed in a way that it can keep on updating with every new feature or new technology, then we will actually end up ending in a less need of various kind of minerals on for which we are import reliant, let's say, for example, lithium. So in that particular case, such idea of right to repair can actually enhance our balance of trade with countries like China. It can actually lead to positive balance of payment as well. And now when to purchase these imported products, if we are in need of less amount of foreign currency, don't you think that the money or the value of rupee will also increase as well? Thus it has a kind of a larger domino effect on Indian economy. Thus, what are the steps which has been taken by the government of India? The today's editorial itself highlights the Right to Repair Framework 2022, which was directed on the guidelines of Nidhi Khare Committee. The Nidhi Khare Committee, which was basically created by the Department of Consumer Affairs. The idea was that it basically instilled the idea of right to choose on the basis of the repairability of the product, to actually harmonize the trade between the original equipment manufacturers as well as third-party workers and small shops. Thus, these original equipment manufacturers are now required to provide complete knowledge and access of manuals, software updates, etc. on a national repair portal which has been created. And they are also kind of envisaged to make available the various part and tools for the repairing. What are the products which has been covered till now? Various farming equipments, mobile phones, tablets, consumer durables, automobiles. What companies are required to do? To provide complete knowledge and access to manuals, schematic, software updates, to actually make diagnostic tools available to the third parties. The point is that even after all of the steps which has been taken, the editorial argues that there are certain prevailing issues. For example, under Electronic Waste Rule 2022, the extended producer responsibility on the manufacturers has been provided, but there is only a passing mention to the repair as a preventive strategy. So there is no specific directive for the manufacturers that they should provide such a specific provision for the repairing of the product. Second, under the Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, there is complete non-recognition of the tacit knowledge and the informal workers. So for example, when we are going to, let's say, for example, a mechanic shop in an open market which does not belong to a specific brand of the car of which you are using, obviously this person has a kind of a generational knowledge of how to repair your car. They can almost repair it in a much lesser point of time, also kind of utilizing lesser equipments, and the functionality of that is also time and tested. But the point is that can this particular person can go, let's say for example, in the company of Maruti and get a job? The answer is no. Why? Because he does not have any kind of specific certification. And that is the complete non-recognition of the tacit knowledge and the informal workers. Thus, there is only provision for short-term certification for formal industry roles. Then under National Education Policy 2020, there is little guidance on how to actually transmit the hand-on repair expertise which these people have. And then under the Life Mission, which actually aims at the social engineering, there is no specific framework which has been provided for the social engineering of the people. So we are saying that yes, we are working upon the idea of reduce, reuse, recycle, but the government does not have any specific framework on how to nudge the behavior of the people. The people keep on discarding the older products. They do not have any such sensitive framework to repair them. At the same time, there are arguments by these companies, like for example, let's say Apple company, against the idea of right to repair itself. They say that under their original framework of design, they have created a kind of an encrypted mechanism to actually kind of secure the sensitive data of the consumer. And if we will keep on providing such data, such information, such software manuals to the third parties, it will eventually lead to, let's say for example, violation of this encrypted mechanism altogether. And that will basically end up violating the right to privacy, which was actually held as a fundamental right under the K.S. Puttaswamy judgment as an integral part of right to dignified life under Article 21 of the Constitution. Then let's say for example, all of these information was provided. There was a third party vendor. The third party service provider actually, let's say, kind of refurbished or kind of made your engine into a working condition. But what if this engine suffered any kind of damage and a blast took place? There was a loss of livelihood as well as property damage. Who will claim the responsibility in this case? The original company who provided the software manual, the original company which is providing the component, or let's say for example this third party service provider who actually repaired this particular engine. Or also the case is that, let's say for example, if such technical knowledge is provided into the market and people start repairing, the point is that don't you think that the sale of the companies are going to be affected? And in that particular case, it is obvious that as the profit will decline, as the revenue will decline, it will ultimately lead to what? The job layoffs. As the job layoffs will take place, it is very obvious that the propensity to consume by the consumer, that will decline. So it will have a kind of a domino effect on the economy altogether. The last is that even though all of us are vouching till now for this idea of right to repair, but let's be very honest, how much of us, let's say, actually know about to repair this particular mobile thing, or let's say for example to repair the car? So there is very low technology know-how among the people altogether, the larger public. That is a major issue, the skilling of the people. So the article provides several innovative steps which shall be taken. The first and foremost is the inclusion of a repairability factor from the design and the procurement policies of the product altogether. The second is to actually shift towards designing for unmaking. So you start creating the products in several compatible parts, the compatible parts which are easily accessible and can be easily repaired by the larger public. The third is to use artificial intelligence for this, create artificial intelligence integrated systems. Then it suggests that the Ministry of Skill and Development shall provide training program for the diagnostic nature of the repair work. As well as we can actually utilize the large language models to actually translate this tacit knowledge which prevails in these local markets into the structure and shareable format across the country. And towards the end of the answer, you guys can actually use a very innovative quote, and that is from the Michael Polanyi, who said that we actually know more than we can tell. So here the kind of a traditional knowledge ecosystem which we have of repairing, which is actually prevailing in the local market, how we can integrate that to the concept of 3R, reduce, reuse and recycle, and that will actually help us to achieve our sustainable development goals. On this line, now try to write this particular question and we move forward to the next news. India's first artificial intelligence powered Anganwadi has actually come up in Maharashtra's Nagpur district, and that is actually a great example that how artificial intelligence can play a very pivotal role in bridging the digital gap, specifically in the rural areas. In this backdrop, we will also try to analyze the various issues which are being faced by the Anganwadi workers at the grassroots level, which forms an important component of your GS2 paper under the theme of government policies and interventions, and under GS1 paper, the issues related to the women development. Before that, let's first try to understand this particular AI-powered Anganwadi which has emerged in the Nagpur district, where the artificial intelligence is actually being utilized to provide various kind of education facilities to the small children between the 0 to 6 years, that is basically the formative years of their life, and forms the component of preschooling. This is also a great example that when there is a kind of an collaborative effort between the various machineries of the administration, that is basically the state government, the district administration, and then there is a community-led effort at the grassroots level, the significant achievements we can actually kind of envisage and achieve at the end. So for example, here the government of Maharashtra, that has also played a very pivotal role in providing virtual reality headset, artificial intelligence enabled interactive smart boards, various kind of tablets, and those have been procured by the district administration under specifically the initiative by an IS officer whose name is Vinayak Mahamuni. So you guys can actually quote this example in your ethics case study as well. What the district administration has done, first of all, they have actually roped in the Kolaba, which is actually a firm working under the India Artificial Intelligence Mission, and the mission Bal Bharti, which actually aims to provide digital access to the children in the rural areas. Under these two initiatives, right, so there are basically the Kolaba workers who are actually helping the Anganwadi workers, and then under the Bal Bharti mission, which aims to provide the digital access to the rural area, under the kind of a collaborative effort between these two initiatives, the Anganwadi workers were actually roped in, who are basically called as Sevika in the region of Maharashtra. And they were trained to navigate the new world of smart learning and digital education. Thus, what can be the future actually? If we keep on enroping such artificial intelligence into the grassroots level through the use of these Anganwadi workers, we can actually aim to use data from the Poshan tracker to actually monitor the nutrition level of the young demographic dividend of the country. Second, monitor the children's growth and their learning outcomes over a period of time. And at the same time, we can also envisage for multilingual education as well through the use of artificial intelligence. And this can actually help us to significantly curb down the digital divide. Very recently, there was a report in Hindu which actually highlighted that how in our country there exist only 52% schools who have functional computers, and only 54% schools have internet accessibility, and how only 41% of the rural population actually uses smartphones. So these people who does not have access to a functional computer, who does not have access to internet accessibility, don't you think that these guys will be completely having less technological know-how about the artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data analytics, and thus it will render them kind of less skillful for the industry 4.0 and 5.0. Thus creating a kind of industry required skill offered mismatch, and thus they will be stuck in a vicious cycle of poverty. Now, when we have discussed about the important role of Anganwadi workers in the provision of nutrition and this kind of early education to these children at the grassroots level, many of the time the people actually gets confused. Who are Asha workers? Who are Anganwadi workers? And who are these auxiliary nurse midwife? What is the difference between them? So let's try to understand the backbone of the grassroots level healthcare first, and then we'll switch towards both the integration of healthcare, nutrition as well as education. So when it comes to the backbone of the grassroots level healthcare, we need to first of all know about the accredited social health activist workers. Remember, they are not government employee. They function as a voluntary worker under the National Rural Health Mission 2005-6, which actually drew its inspiration from the Alma Ata Declaration of 1978, which is specifically aimed to kind of improve the status of public health care in the villages, and the Mitani initiative of the Chhattisgarh government. Mitani basically stands for what? It's a term for a female friend. So the idea what? That such females in the rural areas, in the villages, will voluntarily work to provide what? Primary health care at the grassroots level for women and children. Thus, because they are not recognized as a government worker at all, they basically receive the performance-based incentive. So let's say for example, if there is an Asha worker and she basically facilitated an institutional delivery, which will significantly help us to reduce down our maternal mortality rate. Can anybody tell me here that as per the very recent National Family Health Survey, what is the current maternal mortality rate in our country? Earlier it was 97, now it has declined, a hint has been provided. The point is that, let's say for example, there is an Asha worker and she kind of facilitated an institutional delivery. So for that, let's say they will take around 700, 800 rupees as a kind of a honorary reward to her. Or for example, if she is functioning her day-to-day work for a very long period of time, let's say a month, she is getting something around 1200 to 1500 rupees. Then there comes auxiliary nurse midwife, ANM. This ANM are basically the government employees. So there is a specific cadre under the National Rural Health Mission 2005 to 6. These are basically the female health workers at the sub centers, which actually includes a lot of primary health care. A primary health care, let's say for example, where the same function is actually being performed by the ASHA worker. Here, these auxiliary nurse midwife, they play a pivotal role in family planning, immunization and disease prevention. For example, you guys can see the role of ASHA workers, ANM as well as Anganwadi workers, how they acted as the first line of defense in India's fight against the COVID-19. In India, where there are more than 10 lakh ASHA workers, out of which almost 6 lakh actually went on strike to demand better pay and recognition as a permanent government employees. Considering the significant role which they play in the grassroots level healthcare, for example, their work including visiting the community, ensuring quarantines, bringing medicine and supplies, in addition to taking care of those with palliative needs. In the case of auxiliary nurse midwife, they are actually paid government salary. Now when we have understood this, now let's move to who are Anganwadi workers. Again, they are voluntary workers. Now these Anganwadi workers, they do not function under the National Rural Health Mission, rather they function under the Integrated Child Development Scheme, which was launched in the year of 1975, and it is a centrally sponsored scheme. So remember, these Anganwadi workers, they are considered as government employee because they are working under the Integrated Child Development Scheme. But at the same time, they do not get any fixed salary. Rather, they are basically provided with a kind of honorary awards and rewards. So let's say for example, there are certain functions which they have performed. In return to that, the various state governments have their various share of honorarium which they provide to these Anganwadi workers. In our country, there are, as per the January 1, 2025, the PIB says there are around 13.96 lakh Anganwadis which are registered under the Poshan Tracker application, where under the Integrated Child Development Services Scheme, which specifically serves 0 to 6 years children, pregnant and lactating mothers, they provide various kind of services which has been provided to you in a kind of a flow chart. For example, they register the beneficiaries first. Who are beneficiaries? Any pregnant woman, lactating mother, children from 0 to 6 years old. Then they actually help in mobilization of the rural community, in which cases to encourage participation in Anganwadi activities, to actually raise awareness about the various features of Integrated Child Development Scheme. Then they play a pivotal role in the child care and early childhood education, where they actually maintain the record of children, what is their weight, what is their height, if the nutrition is being provided to them, is that basically resulting in some kind of growth, as well as various kind of teaching material for the people in preschool level from 0 to 6 years. Then they provide preschool education, monitor the growth and development of the children. Also, they monitor their health and nutrition as well by providing or distribution of supplementary nutrition, by conducting health checkups. And let's say for example, if they find that there are certain children who are actually malnourished and thus they are in kind of immediate need of any kind of health support, then these are the people who actually inform the ASHA workers and auxiliary nurse midwife in delivery of the various kind of the health services. So supplementary nutrition, immunization, health checkups, referral services, all of that. And these same Anganwadi workers, they are actually facing various kind of issues. The first and foremost is the lack of parity which exists in the pay. As we were discussing, they are not provided any kind of salary but an honorarium. So there exists concept of no minimum wages for these Anganwadi workers. For example, if we compare the salary of an Anganwadi worker and a person who is an unskilled labor, let's say for example he is driving some e-rickshaw or something in the region of Delhi. A salary of an Anganwadi worker in Delhi after revised estimate in the year of 2018, it is around 12,700 rupees. Let's say for example, an unskilled e-rickshaw driver in Delhi earns approximately on average around 18,000 rupees. So obviously this kind of lack of kind of a uniform salary for them, and lack of parity pay actually translates into what? These women having lack of financial independence at the home, which ultimately results into what? The kind of huge dependence which they have on their male counterpart, and thus the majority of the decision at the home is actually being taken by these male, is specifically related to the nutrition of a woman and nutrition of a child. Have government responded positively in this regard? Absolutely not. There actually exists the condition of policy paralysis. For example, in the year of 2022, when these Anganwadi workers, they actually went on protest that, we want higher pay, we want kind of a minimum wage, we want better working condition. So almost 884 Anganwadi workers and helpers in Delhi were actually terminated for protesting their rights altogether. In this particular context, look at the case study of Pushpa Mitra, who was also one of the person who was terminated. And then she complained that how she had a deceased husband. So the kind of the care of the children was completely on her shoulder. And now when she was terminated, her kind of the remuneration which she was getting, the honorarium, even that was stopped. And that's why she actually lamented that I am not afraid of any kind of hard work, but at least they should yield the fruit. At least pay me the kind of the money which I deserve for the hard work which I am doing. In this particular case, she also basically expressed, ironically, that how she was actually arrested for exercising her freedom of speech and expression under the Article 19 of the Constitution. Then in response to that, there actually remains kind of unfulfilled political promises. For example, in 2018, as a Diwali gift, the Honorable Prime Minister of India at that point of time kind of offered these Anganwadi workers that the center's share is for sure going to increase. Why? Because it's a centrally sponsored scheme. So the kind of the remuneration is actually being shared between the central and the state government. Now let's take Delhi as an example. The share of the Delhi government is actually 79%, and the center share has actually remained stagnant across last 5 years to 21% only. Then there are states which are actually taking the kind of the steps to curb down any kind of such protest by the Anganwadi workers altogether. For example, the Maharashtra Essential Services Maintenance Act 2017, which curb any kind of protest or any kind of union formation by these Anganwadi workers. That is another issue. Beside that, there are several issues like, for example, the technological roadblocks which persist. So for example, recently what happened, that this integrated child development services is actually being implemented by the Ministry of Women and Child Development. They basically said that now from all the beneficiaries of the Anganwadi, lactating mothers, pregnant mothers, the children between 0 to 6 years, all of them, they shall have biometric authentication as well as Aadhaar KYC authentication shall be done. Recently see how the Anganwadi workers in Karnataka were actually opposing these facial recognition tech in this ICDS program. Why they were doing that? Because first of all, they are working at the grassroots level in the villages, where there actually exists the issue of lack of digital penetration and digital illiteracy altogether. So let's say for example, there is actually a kind of a case study where, let's say for example, if they are actually filling all of these forms and details about these Anganwadi beneficiary into a form, an online form, all the details can be submitted, but the submit button towards the end, even only that doesn't work. So from here to here it is digital, and this submit button which is not working, that is India, the India of the past. It is digital India, right? So there are technical glitches, India but not digital. Then let's say for example, such kind of integration of artificial intelligence is obviously not available at all the villages across the country. The kind of the lack of technical infrastructure which they have, the kind of less medicines or diagnostic kind of equipments which are available to these Anganwadi workers, the less number of actually education kind of various kind of books, educational tools which are actually available for the larger Anganwadi workers. So they actually lack the training and the resources. Then remember that these Anganwadi workers, being majorly female in a country like India where the patriarchal norms still prevails, there actually exists the issue of triple burden, where they have to actually perform at its optimum at 3 important roles. The first is, let's say for example, their role as a homemaker, where all the care activities are actually burdened on their shoulder itself. Then they also have to, let's say for example, face various kind of gender discrimination, caste discrimination at the grassroots level. And at the same time, they should also perform their role as the Anganwadi workers as well, where many of the times they have to travel to the long distances in the villages. Do you think that government is paying for such traveling? Do you think that the government is paying for various kind of small expenditure which they incur on daily basis? Absolutely not. They actually have to incur that from their pocket. And when they are indulged in all of these activities, the World Bank basically says the concept of time poverty is imposed upon them. They don't have the time for their nutrition, take care of their health, and they don't have time for any skill accumulation so to actually get a good job, actually get a good paying job. Right? So for example, you guys can recall about the time use survey which was published recently, which showcased that how these women actually work 7 times more, or they spend 7 times more than a man in the caregiving activities altogether. So what are the steps which has been taken by the government of India to actually improve the conditions of the Anganwadi workers at the grassroots level? In the budget 2024, the government said that now the health cover under Janani Suraksha Yojana and Ayushman Bharat Yojana will now be applicable to all the Anganwadi workers. Then the central government recently has actually enhanced the minimum honorarium to 4,500 rupees per month, which shall be kind of supplemented by the state government share as well. Then under the Poshan 2.0, which is nothing but the renaming of the ICDS, 50% supervisor post at the, let's say for example, district level and the sub-centers will now be filled by the promotion of Anganwadi workers. So they will get some incentives for the work which they are doing. Also, now they will get basically kind of maternity paid leave under the Maternity Benefit Act of 1961 for almost 180 days. They are also being promoted to actually fill under Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana and Shram Yogi Manthan for the formalization of their workforce and the various kind of the life insurance coverage which can be provided to them. But are there any steps which we are required to take? Yes, absolutely, and for that we'll take the help of the various Supreme Court directive. The first and foremost is the Gujarat Steel Tube case of 1980, which actually emphasized that how the workers have the right to demand for better working conditions as well as living wage. So we cannot curb them under some acts like the state of Maharashtra. Similarly, in Adarsh Gujarat Anganwadi Union versus the state of Gujarat, the Supreme Court held that these workers are performing onerous duties under the various schemes like for example, Right to Education Act 2009 as well as National Food Security Act 2013. Thus, they shall be covered under the Payment of Gratuity Act of 1972 so that we can actually recognize them as a grade 3 and grade 4 employee, and there shall be a minimum wage now which shall be provided to them and a pension facility as well. Now remember that whenever you guys are writing a conclusion where there is an issue of women which has been involved, there are various brackets which you guys can open for yourself. For example, you can write about the achievement of Sustainable Development Goal 5, gender equality. There is a DPSP, Directive Principle of State Policy under Article 39 Clause A. Women and men have the right to equitable and adequate means of livelihood. Government initiatives for the, let's say for example, promotion of women rights, protection of women, providing them security coverage, taking care of maternity as well as their nutrition, the Mission Shakti. Or is there any larger objective which we can achieve, like for example, the idea of Viksit Bharat by 2047 by bringing such reform? So keep all of this various innovative ways of writing in your mind. Attempt this question. We move forward to the next news, where we are going to cover a very interesting topic and a very important international initiative of our country, which is also very important for the upcoming mains examination, through a news which has appeared in the today's article, which talks about that how the Indian Railways has recently commissioned a more than 50-kilometer track to Sairang. Sairang, which is just 18 kilometers short of the Mizoram's capital Aizawl. And that actually raises the hope for India's ambitious Act East policy, which actually envisages to create various kind of rail and road links with Southeast Asia, thus kind of increasing our logistic and trade to this region, which is currently being dominated by one country, and that is China. So, what are the various initiatives which we have taken to develop our Northeast region? First and foremost, there is Pradhan Mantri Development Infrastructure for the Northeast Region scheme, under which 12 railway projects of length more than 770 kilometers has been sanctioned. And under the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, the road work of more than 89,000 kilometers plus more than 2,300 bridges has been sanctioned as well. Then to further curb down the digital divide which persists in this region, under the Digital Bharat Nidhi, high bandwidth capacity and mobile services to kind of enhance that. In more than 6,300 gram panchayats, they have been made ready, service ready under the BharatNet project. Then further to kind of shorten the time duration which is actually being taken for the travel of the public as well as various cargo, there is your Ude Desh Ka Aam Nagrik Udan scheme. Under that, there is a component regional connectivity scheme through which 90 routes has been operationalized till now to actually enhance the regional connectivity to the unserved and the underserved areas. So the article basically suggests that by creation of this railway line in the region of Mizoram, which is basically a landlocked state. So it is basically surrounded by Tripura, Mizoram, Manipur, Assam here. And this Mizoram also share boundary with Bangladesh as well as Myanmar. So it basically acts as a kind of a very important sitting point for connection with two important countries in the east region. What will happen? So landlocked Mizoram fastest access to the rest of the country, the mainland, is through the air travel. There exists a Aswal-Silchar highway also via Sairang. That is the second fastest option, but that consumes 5 hours. So by creation of this railway line, the purpose is that now when the trains like Rajdhani Express will run on that, this Sairang railhead will actually slash the time which is being taken from the Mizoram to the mainland, the travel time, to 1.5 hour. Don't you think that will significantly kind of improve our ranking in the Logistic Performance Index, which was released in 2023, in which we are ranked 38th? Or for example, it will also kind of enhance further the travel and the tourism which will take place from mainland to this landlocked region. So our ranking in Travel and Tourism Development Index will improve as well. Obviously that will create what? It will further boost the local employment and economy. And the article specifically emphasizes upon the point that how it is going to improve our trade connection with the ASEAN countries, the 10-member ASEAN, Association for Southeast Asian Nation, and it will further enhance our Act East policy which was launched in 2014, which was nothing but a more ambitious version of the Look East policy of 1991. Which is based upon 4 C's to enhance our culture, our commerce, connectivity as well as capacity building with these 10 kind of South Asian nations. To actually enhance our country's role as a net security provider in the region of Indo-Pacific, because remember that these ASEAN states, they actually sit on a very major trading point, that is basically your Strait of Malacca, which actually connects your Indian Ocean to the larger Indo-Pacific Ocean. And this ASEAN nation actually accounts for almost 11% of India's global trade. But remember that we actually incur a huge trade deficit when it comes to these ASEAN nations, almost more than 40 billion plus, versus China, which is currently the largest trading partner of the ASEAN. So what are the steps which the government has taken to actually improve our regional connectivity with these Southeast Asian nation? First, Dimapur-Zuzba rail project in Nagaland, ASEAN Highway 1, Assam to More via Kohima and Imphal, Agartala-Akhora railway project, which we are basically trying to link Bangladesh, Kaladan multi-modal transit project, where we're basically creating various kind of road and rail links to the region of Myanmar. A trilateral highway project was also envisaged, which is again currently under doldrums between India, Myanmar and Thailand. And then India and Japan were basically trying to create joint ventures of infrastructure in this region under India-Japan Act East Forum of 2017. But why there are such huge installments of these products? What are the prevailing issue? The first and foremost, the issue which we face with the ASEAN countries is the huge trade imbalance, where they have a huge positive balance of trade. A lot of their products are actually finding good markets in our country, and the same cannot be said for our product. And that was also one of the major reasons why India actually withdrew from the regional comprehensive economic partnership withdrawal. Why? Because we basically thought that it is going to be kind of negative impact on our Indian economy, specifically to our livestock sector. And by signing this, China has actually gained access to a huge market of Southeast Asia. Then there exists slow progress in connectivity projects because of the various funding issues. The public-private partnership models are not being able to, kind of take into the venture to actually do the investments. Considering also the bureaucratic bottlenecks, considering the various political instability which prevails in the region. So all these infrastructural projects which we have envisaged, they have not been able to be extended beyond our borders as highlighted in today's article. The major reason for that is the political instability in the region. For example, the military coup which took place in Myanmar in 2021, or for example the recent removal of the Sheikh Hasina government in Bangladesh in 2024. So these important projects like for example Kaladan and Agartala Akhora railway project, all of them has actually been stalled. At the same time, China is basically kind of practicing a wolf warrior diplomacy where it is basically kind of treating this Southeast Asian nation as nothing but the larger sphere of its political projection. And that is why there exists a kind of a different divergence of stand on the Indo-Pacific strategy between the two nations, that is India and the ASEAN grouping. Because we do not want to militarize the region. That is the reason we have been, kind of putting the efforts to non-militarize the Quad. At the same time, these countries who are basically facing a lot of pressure from China, they actually want the kind of a various security and military initiatives to be taken. Thus, how we can avoid these friction? The first and foremost is to implement our security for all and growth for all in the region doctrine, where we can align that with the ASEAN orientation of the Indo-Pacific to provide the freedom of navigation and regional stability by kind of actually supporting them on various military levels as well. Then we actually need to renegotiate the free trade agreement which we signed with ASEAN. That is kind of hampering our trade. That is leading to a kind of a huge trade deficit for our country. At the same time, why not also to increase our production level? So we are saying make in India. Why not to transition to make for world and thus act as a kind of an alternative which the various countries are applying, called as China plus one strategy, where they are actually trying to diversify their markets, and thus instead of relying solely on the Chinese product, if they want an alternative, India can actually emerge as one. Then various kind of fast-track connectivity projects can be provided for economic integration and to further co-develop the various critical and emerging technologies under the framework of mineral security partnership, which very recently India has signed. Remember all of these points and we move forward to the next news, where we are actually going to discuss a very important aspect, and that is the energy security. Why it has been in the news today? Because the editorial in Indian Express actually highlights that how energy security has actually typically been discussed within the frame of access, reliability and the affordability of the fossil fuels. However, today against the backdrop of the global warming which is taking place and the Panchamri target which we have taken for ourselves, where we say that we are going to become a net zero emission country by the year of 2070, this actually results into too narrow a perspective. Why? Because India is on a two-track energy trajectory. One track which actually relates to the demand for fossil fuels, which we still have. We are heavily import reliant, for example, to actually procure various kind of oil, crude oil, and the other to actually shift towards the renewable energy like for example solar, wind, bio, etc. The national objective is to decrease the share of the former and increase the latter in the energy consumption basket. Why it is important for us? Because for example, as per the 6th assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the global warming which is taking place, the world temperature has already increased by 1.45 degrees Celsius from the pre-industrial level. And because of that, there is taking place the rising sea surface temperature. So obviously there will be intensification of disasters and El Nino events. And India actually lies at the brink where, as per the Green Watch report, we are already the 7th most climate change vulnerable country. You guys can actually see the kind of the various extreme weather events which you are reading in the newspaper on daily basis. The flash flood which very recently took place in the Himachal Pradesh, and the kind of the significant impact it had on the Himachal Pradesh apple economy, which actually constitutes to almost more than 6,000 crore. And all of that economy and the people who are actually reliant on this particular business, they are going to be impacted. The whole logistics sector, which actually kind of depends upon the supply of apple to the other parts of the country, that is going to be impacted. So there are various economical impact of climate change which is very much evident to you as well. Thus, at the same time, when we are saying that we are actually trying to transition towards renewable energy, we need to address our over-reliance on thermal power as well. Because as per November 2024, the data which was provided to by us by the Ministry of Power, the total installed power capacity is around 456 gigawatt, of which the coal-based thermal power plant generation constitutes 217 gigawatt. That is 47% of our total capacity, and almost 71% of the power generation comes from these thermal power plants. And when we are saying that we are going to completely switch, or let's say for example very strategically switch to the renewable energy, we need to address two important factors. The first is the rising power demand which we are facing every single year, and because of which there is a huge deficit which is being caused in our power supply. On the other hand, you guys know that there are various issues when it comes to the installation of renewable energy. A long gestation period of installation is one of them. The second is, let's say for example, look here, the kind of the cost comparison. So right now, let's say if we talk about the generation and the storage of a solar energy per kilowatt hour, that is around, let's say for example, 8 rupees per kilowatt hour. But for thermal power plant, it is actually much cheaper, only 6 rupees. Only if we keep on installing such renewable energy for a very long period of time till 2030, only then this renewable energy cost is actually going to come down below thermal power plant. So obviously for the power generators, it is very much cheaper to actually use fossil fuels based power generation. Then the article suggests that how India has actually done well to safeguard its energy security in the traditional sense. What we did, we actually opened up multiple sources of crude oil and has resisted the Western government pressure to sanction Russia. We did not follow that. For example, if you look at India's top 5 crude oil supplier in the million tons, almost 37% of it that we purchase from Russia, 20% from Iraq, 13% from Saudi Arabia, 8% from UAE, and only 3% for US. And thus we created a kind of a resilient supply chain. Also, by steadily increasing the share of Russian crude in its import basket from just being 2.1% in 2021 to almost 37% in 2024. So that has reduced the weighted average cost of the basket of imported crude by at least $2 per barrel. For example, USA is trying to pressurize us that buy the oil for us. We are completely rejecting that. Why? Because the cost of shipping oil from USA is around $4 per barrel. In comparison to that, if we basically import from the West Asia, it is only $1.5 per barrel. Also, the US crude grade has actually less compatibility with the different petroleum products of our country. And why we are actually going to procure more oil from any other nation, don't you think that will act as a kind of an antithesis to India's Panchamrit targets altogether? Where we are saying that by the year of 2030, 50% of our renewable energy, total energy capacity will actually come from renewable energy sector altogether. So what are the issues as per the today's article in the renewable energy installation? The first and foremost is the study which has been conducted by Team Lee's RegTech. Use this in your mains answer. First, there exist more than 2,700 compliance obligation across 35 states and central government. There is at least requirement of 30 different department approvals. 40% compliances are related to labor, land acquisition, environmental safety, and thus they have a long gestation period. Then if we are going to install a solar power plant of 1 megawatt, we will end up requiring 100 plus licenses and registrations. So there is a huge policy paralysis and bureaucratic red tape which exists, which act as a hindrance to the renewable energy installation. Look at the renewable energy development in India till 2024. The solar power constituted 54%, wind power 33%, and the rest of that has been given in this table. Keep them very dear to you. The data has been provided by Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. So again, what are the steps which the government has taken? A task for all of you is mention 2 schemes for solar energy, 2 schemes for hydropower, and 2 schemes for wind power in the comment box, and that will create a kind of a way forward for you. We move forward to the next news, where we'll try to understand what is the concept of stable coins. First and foremost, what is the context of the news? The news says that how the Hong Kong is actually taking a decisive step forward in regulating certain type of cryptocurrencies as it now prepares to enforce the Stablecoins ordinance. Amidst an explosion of interest in stablecoins and their promising application in both personal finance and international business. What is stablecoin? First and foremost, it is a type of a cryptocurrency. So the question will be, what is cryptocurrency? Cryptocurrency is nothing but a digital token which actually allows the people to make payment through an online system. But is it a legal tender? The answer is no. So for example, we have a national currency that is rupees. That is being basically kind of backed by the Reserve Bank of India. It has the governor's signature, right, under the RBI Act of 1934. So that is a legal tender by the government. In the case of, let's say for example, such cryptocurrency, there exists no intrinsic value as well as it is not issued by any country altogether. For example, Bitcoin and Ether, which you guys might have heard about. So this is your old and new forms of money. What is a fiat currency? It is a traditional currency like for example US dollar or Japanese yen, which is actually issued and backed by the governments. So they rise and fall with the fortune of the nations as well as the demand and supply mechanism which exist. So for example, if there will be rise in the demand of Indian product, more Indian rupee will be required to buy this product. The value of the rupee will increase in comparison to US dollar. Simple. Then there exists cryptocurrency, the digital tokens which are created by dispersed group of believers with transactions recorded on a secure online ledger, which is basically available to all of them. So there is a kind of a transparency. The prices can be volatile as their value depends on the acceptance and the use. Then comes the concept of stablecoin. Stablecoin is also a class of cryptocurrency, but now why we are calling it stable? Because its value is actually linked to the asset. So this stability is basically achieved through the process of pegging it with some other thing, some other asset. What can be these assets? These assets can be a fiat currency like dollar, Japanese yen, Indian rupee, or for example any commodity like gold or any other cryptocurrency like Bitcoin itself. So for example, the USD pegged stablecoin, it actually remains around $1, okay, mostly. What is the difference between a central bank digital currency? It is also a digital currency, but again it's a legal tender which now has been released by the Reserve Bank of India, like for example e-rupee. So that is the idea. Now why, like some of you might be wondering that what are the demand? Why these cryptocurrencies are being used at all if they are not a legal tender? Remember this, that let's say for example, there is a concept called as penny stocks. Penny stocks are basically those companies who are very low in numeration right now, and thus you can buy a certain share of that at a very low value. The idea is that let's say for example that company is creating some artificial intelligence tool which can become very useful in the future. So the price of that particular company is going to shoot up, and thus the investors in this particular thing will end up making more money. The same is the concept of cryptocurrency. It basically is acting nothing but as a kind of an alternative investment mechanism, even though it is not recognized by the governments. That is basically suggesting that, see, there are a lot of investments which are being done to mine a particular crypto coin. In this mining, a lot of energy is being utilized, a lot of investment is being made. So thus there is a lot of investment as well as there is a limited amount of cryptocurrency which exists. So thus creation of a kind of an artificial demand which has taken place through this process of crypto mining. Now the question is, how stable are these stable coins? They do not face any kind of volatility? The answer is no. Even stable coins, they exhibit volatility. For example, the technical factors and the various kind of world events which can take place. Let's say for example, as we were discussing, the less number of cryptocurrencies which are being generated. If the production will fall, the value of stable coins that will shoot up. So there is no such stability. Or for example, fall in the asset value. So if they are pegged with gold and the demand of the gold will decline, so the value will decline. I hope that happens. Then asset run to the market sentiments. So for example, the people are saying that okay, the asset is running, the market sentiments decline, the value of stable coins will decline as well. That will lead to further panic withdrawals. So do not go with the statement that stable coins values are completely stable. It's not like that. Even they fluctuate as per the market trends. Remember all of this point and we move forward to the next news, where we'll try to understand that how does the World Bank actually classifies the country into a rich country and a poor country. A very interesting article. So the article says that every year the World Bank assigns each country to an income group, and that is based upon the gross national income per capita, not gross domestic product. Domestic product means that all the production done by the Indians, even as the residents who are citizen of other country, into our domestic territory. Here we are including gross national income. So let's say, for example, if there is a foreign company who is producing in our country, that will not be included. Okay? That is the idea. So GNI per capita is nothing but the measure of average income of country's residents, including income that is earned abroad. Since countries report their GNI in their local currencies, the World Bank converts this figure into US dollar using the exchange rate. And then it places the countries in one of the 4 income groups which you guys can see here. For example, you guys can see the India here, and the India falls into lower middle income. Now the question arises, how? Why India is a lower middle income country? And how, let's say, for example, Russia can fall in the high income and China can fall in the upper middle income? Because there are several income brackets. So for example, if GNI per capita of a country is less than $1,135, then it basically falls into low income country. If the GNI, gross national income per capita, is between $1,136 to $4,495, then the company falls in the category of lower middle income country. So what is the GNI per capita of India as per the budget 2024? It was around 1.97 lakh rupees or 2,731. Thus we falls in the bracket of a lower middle income country. Does that mean that, let's say, for example, if there is a country which falls in this bracket, high income, that basically implies that it is a developed country? No. There is no such standard definition of a developed nation. There is UNCTAD. UNCTAD only does one thing. It releases a list of least developed nation, and those are 47, which can then, let's say, for example, have certain trade concessions by WTO. When we are saying we are a lower middle income country, or let's say, for example, our GNI per capita is this much, does that basically implies that we have done kind of, significant achievements? There are two sides of the coin. Where does our country stand? So we are basically producing 7.6% of the GDP of the world right now. If we look at our ranking per capita income, we are at 136th. The literacy rate has increased more than 80%. The life expectancy has increased as well, more than 67. But at the same time, we have abysmal ranking when it comes to Human Development Index. We are ranked 134. And in the Global Hunger Index, we actually ranked 105. So remember all of these important data, use them in relative positions in your mains answer, and we move forward to the last news of the day, where we'll try to read about the project Cheetah which has featured in the news. Why so? The article basically suggests that how there were various suggestions which were provided by the Cheetah Project Steering Committee, which was shelved later. This Cheetah Project Steering Committee was actually established by the National Tiger Conservation Authority in 2023. A kind of a memory recalling question here. Can anybody tell me, this National Tiger Conservation Authority was created under which article, which act of the government, and thus it is a statutory body, and who presides the meeting of this National Tiger Conservation Authority? So what were the suggestions which were given by Cheetah Project Steering Committee? It said that moving cheetahs too old to actually made to Gandhi Sagar Wildlife Sanctuary and attempt a surrogacy program at Bhopal's Van Vihar. Also, it suggested that how Madhya Pradesh wildlife officials were actually struggling to revive the prey base at Kuno. The kind of the reintroduction of cheetah which has taken place into our country in the Kuno National Park in Madhya Pradesh, where they suggested measures like, for example, introducing black buck from Agra's Sikandra Monument premises to actually boost the prey base number. What is this Project Cheetah? Under the Project Cheetah, there was translocation of 8 cheetahs from Namibia and 12 from South Africa to the Kuno National Park to actually revive the extinct population of cheetahs in our country. What has been the drawback? 8 cheetahs and 5 cubs have died so far. So remember some specific information about cheetah. Cheetah is basically considered as the fastest land animal, running almost to the speed of 120 km per hour, where it has the capability to actually reach from 0 to 100 km per hour in the span of 3 seconds. The point is, as per the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the Asiatic cheetahs are critically endangered, remember, and the African cheetahs are listed as vulnerable. In the WPA 1972, it was basically listed as a Schedule 2 animal. So remember all of these facts, and with this we have reached to the end of our discussion today. Do not forget to attempt the questions at the end of the video and test your knowledge. We will meet in a very interesting discussion very soon. Till then, all the very best and thank you.